Welcome, I'm Catherine. I'm a content marketing manager here at Ciphr. Today's theme is building a workplace that works for women, how we're inspiring inclusion here at Ciphr. Joining me today is a panel of Ciphr's female leaders. I'll just get them to introduce a little bit about each other to kick us off. So first we have Anne Alcock, our Head of Diversity. Welcome, Anne. It's great to have you with us today.
Hi Catherine. Hi everybody. I'm very pleased to be here to join you all. Shall I just introduce a few words about myself? Okay,
yes,
so
please.
Yeah, I'm Head of Diversity at Marshall's, which is Marshall e-learning, and we joined the Ciphr group about a year ago. And I'm also working now with Ciphr on their internal DEI strategy, so that's great news. My whole career has been in diversity and inclusion, so sort of suppose coming towards the later stages of my career now. And I've worked with very many organisations and companies in this space, so on gender, but across the whole broad spectrum of all sort of the DEI world, if you like. From a personal perspective, I guess for me, had a lot of experience and talked to a lot of people around what diversity and inclusion means to them, and particularly around gender equality. For me, I guess my current challenges are, as someone in sort of maybe their later stages of their career, I've been through that kids piece, but now I'm coming at the other end in terms of caring responsibilities for an elderly mother and an elderly mother-in-law, both of whom have very different needs, but quite acute and challenging needs. So trying to kind of balance that, I think for several years, I think that in that middle stage of life, women can tend to feel in a bit of a sandwich at both sides, with young adult children maybe, or even younger children, but also responsibilities for care at the other end of the spectrum with parents or elderly relatives. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm very pleased to be here with you today.
Thanks so much, Anne. I'm going to hand over to Claire, who's our Chief People and Operations Officer here at Ciphr. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you for having me. Claire Williams, so Chief People and Operations Officer, as Catherine said. I've been with Ciphr 6 years and do not claim to be an expert in diversity as Anne absolutely is, but certainly here to speak about my personal experience of that journey of career progression into a senior leadership role, now a board member, so I'm an executive director of Ciphr Group, but also my experience, I have a 14-year-old daughter, so I've been through the challenges that come with having children, especially when you're on that career trajectory, and just some of the other challenges that have been faced across the years, and some of the positives that have obviously come alongside that. So very much celebrating the positives and how we can all be helping and empowering other women in the workplace.
Brilliant, thank you, Claire. And rounding out our panel, we have Ange, who's our BD team leader. Welcome, Ange.
Hi there, Catherine. Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Ange. I'm one of the business development team leaders here at Ciphr. I've been here for a year and a half now, which has just flown by. I'm on a team here at Ciphr with 9 other men, so one of a small number. I've had a career in sales pretty much most of my working life, face to face, and obviously on the phones as well. I'm also juggling a few other things in my life as well, quite early on in my career, so looking at typical things like buying a house and working out all those other life scenarios in the background. But yeah, really excited to share some of my background with you.
Thanks so much, Ange. And then just a bit about me. I've been with Ciphr for quite a long time. It'll be 7 or 8 years this year. During that time, I've had a few job title changes. I've been off on maternity leave. I'm now mum to 3-year-old twins. So I now work a 4-day week, sort of compressed hours. So I'm dealing with sort of those, I've dealt with how did you come back into work and reestablish yourself and build up that credibility and confidence from maternity leave, and then also juggling all of that mum guilt and trying to keep a household running while you're also trying to run a team, which is really, really challenging, and things that lots of parents face, but a lot of that load can fall on women particularly. So hopefully that gives you a good view of our panel here today and the kind of things that we're interested in. Today's agenda, I'm going to take you through a quick introduction to who Ciphr and Marshall e-learning are. Then we're going to dive straight into our discussion. The Q&A is open at any time, so you can get in touch with us. We have lots of ways for you to interact with us. We have a question and answer pane specifically where you can post questions, which will be moderated by Charlotte, and then so there may be a slight delay before they pop up. We also have a chat, so if you want to have just a more general discussion or respond to what we're talking about, you can pop those in the chat. If you've used Teams before, you might have used the reaction options where you can send in like a thumbs up if you're or a sad face if you're not really like feeling the vibe of what we're talking about. We also have some polls happening today, so I'm just going to launch one of those now just so you get a feel of how those work. Some of those will pop up at the end just for some feedback about today's broadcast. So lots of ways for you to interact with this discussion. It is very much discussion based once we get past the formal bit up front where we introduce ourselves, so do get involved. If you're not come across Ciphr before, we're a specialist HR and payroll solutions provider. Our customers vary in size from 100 odd employees to companies employing thousands, and Ciphr can provide functionality to help manage the full employee lifecycle with our modules covering everything from HR and onboarding to payroll and e-learning and LMS. As Anne mentioned, she joined Ciphr when we acquired Marshall e-learning last spring. Marshall's is a leading UK-based provider of off-the-shelf e-learning content, bespoke courses, and also D&I consultancy, which is led by Anne. And their experts are skilled at delivering challenging projects and are committed to inclusion and accessibility. They work with more than 300 clients, including most universities in the UK. And after this, and here's just a snapshot of Marshall's comprehensive content library. It covers everything from neurodiversity to gender equality at work, compliance, microaggressions, and management training. After this webinar, please look out for your free trial offer. Somebody will be getting in touch via email. You're welcome to claim a free trial of our gender equality at work micro-learning module. So look out for that if you want to take advantage of that offer. Okay, great. So now we can dive into our discussion. Now we've got all of the admin bits out of the way. We're going to kick off with sort of looking at a definition of inclusion and what that means to all of us individually. And Anne, I'd like to open that over to you first as somebody with a wealth of experience in this area. How do you define inclusion and how do you see companies defining that and trying to create that within an organisation culture?
Yeah, okay. So I'm only going to speak very briefly because I think, sort of definitions are potentially quite boring and it'd be really nice to get into examples and experiences. But thinking about this in terms of, in this space, we talk about diversity, we talk about equity, we talk about equality, we talk about inclusion, and we talk about belonging. So those are some of the sort of key terms that are often mentioned in this space. So I think, just to talk through a couple of those, including in the term inclusion. So we can say diversity is a fact. So diversity is about people in a particular space, in an organisation, in a workplace, and their identities. And so we can identify and define those identities in lots of different sorts of ways. And many organisations, put in place monitoring in order to understand who's attracted to their organisation in terms of recruitment, who actually becomes part of the workforce, who's present in the workforce. And you can also analyse that data in other ways, that who gets promoted more than another group. So we can talk about different identities, and those are often related to the sort of Equality Act protected characteristics, which I'm sure you're all familiar with those. So diversity is, I like to say, it's about bums on seats. It's about the people who we've got, and about who they are in terms of their identities, what they look like, what their experiences are, where they come from. Inclusion, on the other hand, we can say, so if diversity is a fact, we talk about inclusion being an act. So I think it's which implies that it's something an organisation needs to do to try to create a culture where people feel that they can be part of that they're valued, that they belong, that they have opportunities, that there's fairness. So inclusion it can be a feeling, but it's a state that we want to try to create for business reasons, but also because it's a fair and the right thing to do. But the term inclusion in the DEI space also implies this notion of action, that employers, organisations need to think about how they make that possible, you know, how they create a culture where people feel like they can participate. So it's about inclusive leadership, it's about encouraging people to learn from each other, it's about encouraging people to listen to the experiences of others, and where things might not be fair, it's about unconscious bias and awareness of that type of thing. So it's about organisations enabling and supporting their workforce to take actions to understand what it means for everyone to be part of that culture. Then we can also talk about belonging, and this is a word that's more and more often used in this space. So belonging is that feeling that individual employees have or don't have, obviously very much linked to who you are, which is the which is the diversity piece, and to inclusion, which is the sort of action and culture piece. But belonging is the feeling that you have to some extent or another. You know, do you belong in your team, in your organisation, in the culture? And hopefully, obviously, we want to encourage people and enable people to belong at work, because, as I say, there are very clear business benefits, as well as being, you know, that would just be the thing that you would want to do if you were a good employer.
And this isn't something that we can just expect to happen and it can go just to happen on its own without intervention. It has to be a really deliberate thing.
Yeah, I think it does, because all the experiences and all the research tells us that many people don't feel included at work. They don't feel like they belong, and the stats also show us that some groups within our workforces are less likely to be promoted, are less likely to be recruited, are less likely to feel that their skills and their abilities are used to the extent that they should be. So there's a sense of exclusion there, and it goes back to systems and processes and policies that perhaps have been around for a while, and nobody really realises that they might unintentionally be disadvantaging a particular group or marginalising that group. So it's companies, organisations being alert all the time to, we do this in this way. What does that mean? What's the actual impact? And how can we rethink what we do to ensure that it works for everyone? And you've got that unconscious bias piece. I mean, I think unconscious bias in some quarters has had a bit of bad press lately, potentially. But, you know, we know from scientific research that the minute we set eyes on somebody, we make judgments about them. That kicks in. It's a chemical reaction in our brains if we are faced with somebody who's quite different to us, who maybe we feel a little bit nervous about, who we don't really know or understand. We don't know what their experiences are. You know, obviously that's not as critical in today's workplace as it was when we were sort of hunter-gatherers, but our brains still work in that way. And, you know, that's no judgment. It's just something that we need to really understand does happen and does go on. So it's guarding against that. So yeah, actually taking action is very important. Catherine, you're absolutely right.
And so the theme of this year's International Women's Day is inspiring inclusion. So Claire, I want to pick up with you specifically about some of the challenges that Ciphr has faced around inspiring inclusion for women, and how you've uncovered those challenges and what's kind of been set in process to tackle them.
Yeah, okay. So we've been probably tracking our DEI stats and our gender pay gap reporting for about 4 years. We're not yet at the threshold to need to legally report on that, but we've felt it's important to start capturing the data. A lot of what we're planning, which I'll happily speak about in a little bit, is we're now moving into a phase, myself and Anne and a number of other employees around the business, to put together a 5-year social value strategy with a stream within that focused, on DEI, alongside things like, impact on the community and the environment. But what we've focused more on over the last few years has been some of the fundamentals around the processes. So, there's a lot out there that you can pull on around the frameworks to introduce that drive a more unbiased process, the screening and selection processes you have in place, the evidence-based decision making. lots of training around recruitment and selection for our managers. And that's, you know, that's all brilliant, but it's very hard to pick apart the unbiased piece that comes with time and experience, as we all know. And I think it's that challenge of, if you're faced with a male and a female equally qualified and you've potentially got a male interviewer, I personally think a lot of it comes down to how you're, you know, how confident you are in those situations. And I think typically men are more confident than women in those interview scenarios, as an example, and therefore trying to get employers' mindset into a bit more of giving the benefit of the doubt to those female candidates in that scenario, as an example. So lots of the work has been around really challenging our managers through those recruitment and selection processes, and making sure we've got multiple members involved in the interview process, so we get a real different perspective and mindset over what those employees might bring to us. Some of the other things we've been doing with our existing workforce is we made the decision a couple of years ago to expand and improve our benefits portfolio. So a lot of it was around how can we make particularly that whole work-life, family-friendly side of being an employee easier and more accessible. So we enhanced our maternity and adoption and shared parental leave. So, you know, this was both for our male and female employees to be able to take that time with their new families without quite so much of a financial pressure. We also introduced some family forming benefits. So people can take a couple of days paid leave, whether they're going through family forming treatment themselves or supporting their partner. You know, I remember the challenges I faced when I fell pregnant, and I was quite young. I was in a, you know, my first head of role. I was like 23, 24, and got pregnant, and kind of, it makes it sound like it wasn't planned to get pregnant, and then kind of had to have this absolute, oh my gosh, my career, what am I going to do moment. So really figuring out how we can take that away from our employees, and how we can make sure that they feel supported through that process, that we're, you know, making that easier for them. So we've done lots of work around our benefits. And then introducing things like, we've got the menopause chat now, we've got a men's health group, we're about to introduce our female health group, which is the Ciphr. And that's not just necessarily health based, actually we want to talk about all the challenges that women face in the world of work. You know, topics that have been brought up is around, you know, personal security, you know, how do you tackle certain conversations at work? Can we talk about aspects to do with relationships? So anything we can do to try and make that working world feel more inclusive. And I think for me, DEI is really funny, because I think I should be the most important one. I think if you don't have an inclusive culture and you're not introducing practices and policies that really encourage that inclusive culture, you're never going to get the diversity, because people won't stay if they don't feel that when they're in the organisation and you're not living and breathing it. You know, it's going to be a short-lived win on the diversity front, because you'll never maintain it. But yeah, that's some of the stuff we've been doing at Ciphr. We've got a long journey ahead on the social value piece. I'm quite keen there that we focus on things like social mobility, particularly those that are economically inactive, which, you know, a big group is going to be mums and some dads, but, you know, it will predominantly be women that have taken time out to start a family and then are struggling to get back into the world of work, and they will be, you know, bright, qualified, brilliant women. So that's a real area that we're quite passionate about on this social value journey, is that social mobility piece.
That's awesome, Claire. I just want to bring Angie, because you've been with Ciphr for a relatively short period, but in terms of like looking and applying to jobs and seeing things like promoted quite clearly up front, like family forming benefits and enhanced maternity pay, how does that feel to you when you're at an early stages career where maybe parenthood is not on the agenda yet, but it might be, and, you know, cost of living is difficult? So how does that feel to see that advertised so openly, and like flexible work options and stuff?
Yeah, I think it's one thing that definitely drew me to Ciphr. It's something that, as I say, like being quite young in my career, it's in the back of my mind that, you know, that's an experience I'm going to go through, and you know, something that's going to happen in my life that I'm going to really want to embrace. And whenever you start anywhere new, you want to understand that that's something that the company's thought about, the company's going to support you on, and you're not going to feel like you're in a difficult spot if that happens, because it's an exciting period of your life. So I think joining the organisation knowing that those benefits were there and that the company's already thought about them, it's not a conversation I have to even bring to the table, it's already there. I think it made it made me feel a lot more comfortable joining a new organisation that I didn't know, but also quite excited for those, you know, those adventures in life that I was maybe a little bit nervous about before.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
we get sorry.
Go on, Claire.
Sorry. I was just saying we get all the benefit from that as well. You know, not only does it help us attract candidates, but we have a far better chance of retaining and in the long term, you know, and that's the drop off is where you see women that, you know, take time out or aren't able to come back part-time to roles, but hopefully through that benefit we'll get the added value of Ange staying with us for hopefully a much longer tenure than we would have seen, especially when you look at the world of work where people are, you know, having much shorter tenures in jobs. We've got Gen Z coming through. I think they're going to make 3 career moves in their lifetime, let alone the number of role position changes they make within that time. So it is really important that employers are thinking about those generations that are coming through. You know, absolutely we need to be looking at the whole spectrum, but those generations coming through, they are the future of the workforce, and they're also going to be the future leaders in the workforce that are making the changes that we're trying to make now and building on them. So I think there is a responsibility for employers to think about the tone and the message they're setting with those female employees they're bringing on to continue to build and support that whole agenda.
Yeah, can I just come in there very, very quickly? And I just think that's absolutely supported by research that's been done. You know, we know that younger people have expectations about the credentials, if you like, of employers on whatever you like to call it, diversity, equity, inclusion, and that, you know, if you've got a brilliant candidate, a young person who's got a couple of choices, a couple of offers, you know, they're going to be looking to see what type of culture. They're going to be doing their research about the organisation, the type of cultures that's there, the kind of benefits that are on offer, and that can very often, we know it's a deal breaker for young people. So if you're really looking to you know, attract the brightest and best, whoever they are, it is really important. It is really important.
For sure. Yeah, I was only going to add, like, my personal experience of having gone through a pregnancy while working and being pregnant with twins. It was not the most straightforward pregnancy, but I had a very flexible and accommodating manager who said, you know, if you need extra time to recover and rest, you know, you could do that. And having that experience meant that the conversations around can I return part-time were less daunting, and I felt like I had a greater chance of succeeding. And that means by working like compressed hours, that makes it more financially viable for me to stay working and put my children in daycare, because that's really expensive. So all of that flexibility like pays off down the line. Like, if as a manager, if you receive that, then you can pay it forward to your employees when they need it too. So it's just kind of a snowball effect if you have that kind of culture. We've had lots of questions coming in, actually, which is awesome in the chat. Thank you for everyone participating, particularly while we're talking about hiring. Amelia asks, how can we demonstrate our D&I commitment through the hiring process? Are there things we should be mentioning in job ads? Are there things that we should be discussing with candidates as they're going through those interviews? I guess Claire or Anne, that's probably a question for you guys.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can talk about some of the stuff we do or some of the stuff that I'd recommend. I mean, certainly working with your internal, or you might have an external agency you're working with, there's definitely things you can build into the job ads to make sure that it's really clear. More so I'd recommend you're focusing on what the recruitment and selection methodology and processes are that are used, as opposed to just kind of, we're an equal opportunities employer, because everyone will be putting that on their advert. So maybe talk about what to expect through the interview process. And actually that's just really good practice, because we all know that job hunting can be incredibly daunting. So, you know, if you've got multiple levels of interview processes, if you can make it clear there's any screening tools or processes they'll be going through as part of that. We, for example, use a system called Vervo to do our candidate screening, so that we've got some really evidence-based selection criteria and screening that's applied against our candidates. We will have multiple levels of interviews, and we'll make sure that they're involving members of the people and talent team, for example. Things I'd like to look to introduce, and that if you do already have, I would really shout about, is things like if you have quotas for the minimum number of women, for example, in the final interview stage. That's a great way to make sure that you're ensuring females that are applying for jobs really have faith that what you're saying you're putting into action. So that whole piece around equal opportunities is genuinely being sung through those processes.
Thanks, Claire. Is there anything to add from your perspective, Anne? You've worked with lots of companies on D&I, of course.
Yeah, I think it's just really making sure that you're, you're, as Claire said, it's fine to say you're an equal opportunities employer or some other kind of vague phrase like that, but really spelling that out regularly in your recruitment literature, what that actually means, and organisations sometimes also, on your website as well, very clearly, and there's also more subtle messages around the imagery that you've got on your website, etc., just making sure that you've thought about diversity and inclusion from that perspective as well. And I think, I was on a webinar the other day, actually, not on the panel, but they were talking about a strapline, which I think has come from government, actually, but I think it's supported by the Fawcett Society, which is a women's gender equality, very long-standing organisation. And there's promotion at the moment around using a tagline, which is happy to talk flexible working. So actually having that out there, and the idea is that you actually initiate conversations. The panel would initiate the conversation about flexible working at an interview, which I think is a very tricky one, because I think if you're a candidate, you might be thinking, I want to ask this question, but if I ask this question, there's assumptions going to be made about the type of hours that I want to work. It's a very dangerous road to go down. I'll wait till I get the job offer and then I might ask the question. But the suggestion or proposal, and I think it's a tricky one, whether in reality, I think the people who are on the panel have to be very well prepared and well informed and able to have those discussions and conversations. But the idea is that the employer actually asks all candidates, or flags the opportunity for flexible working for the particular role that's being recruited to, and says, would you like to have that conversation now? We're very, we see this as a positive thing. It's part of our approach, and we're absolutely committed to this. Whether people actually trust, whether the candidates actually trust the organisation, that's that they are what they say on the tin in terms of their commitment, is another issue. But I think that's an interesting one. I certainly think in your recruitment literature, if not in a specific interview situation, that really clear promotion of what you do and how you put into practice your commitments around flexibility and diversity and inclusion, I think really important. Yeah.
I think sorry if I can just jump in. A couple of other things that might be quite useful. One of the things we're working on at the moment is really reviewing our employee value proposition and actually thinking about it in the same way you would go to a customer with a proposition. The war on talent we're all aware of, but actually putting together our pitch deck of what we're going to send to candidates to make sure it really tries to articulate our culture in a very storytelling way. And within that whole piece around this is the journey we're going on, because I think you also have to be really authentic in admitting where you're not quite there in relation to your diversity and inclusion agenda. We know we've got work to do, and we're very happy to say this is where we are, but this is where we're wanting to go. So I think being transparent and honest as well. Don't try and create an image of an organisation that isn't the reality, because you won't get the quality of hire that first year. People will leave because they're not seeing that reality come through in the way you're working.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to add that if you think about it from an employer brand perspective, like if you're featuring employees on your LinkedIn profile or reviews on Indeed or on Glassdoor, are you mentioning flexibility? Are you showcasing female leaders or junior female talent and showing that there is evidence for career progression or returning after maternity leave? Are you talking openly about different types of flexible working? Is that school hours? Is it part-time, like compressed hours? Is it annual hours? Does it job share? If you do job share, shout about it, because like that's so rare, and a lot of people would be really grateful to have that opportunity. And I think, Claire, I wanted to bring in the managers training that the people team put forward for interview scoring, and the the processes you helped us run through in the training you did. So you can talk better about it than I did, but your team, like we went through a lot of training, and you now have formal ways of assessing candidates and scoring them to remove some of that bias. And I think that's worth highlighting in this scenario, that it's not, you wouldn't put it on your job advert, right? But it's a background process that supports it.
Absolutely, yeah. Between the actual, whether we're using a technology-based screening tool coupled with the screening that and the competency-based interviews that our managers will go through, but no one is allowed to recruit unless they've done the recruitment and selection training. So all of our managers, anyone that is interviewing, needs to go through that process to make sure that it's so that they're, at least we can hold ourselves accountable that we've done everything we can to try and make that process as inclusive as it possibly can be and as fair to candidates. And actually, we've extended that through a lot of how we work more generally. So very happy to share it actually with everyone on this call. But we've got what we've put together is our kind of employee profile, and it's 6 different fictional employees that have a range of different elements of diversity, length of service. Are they mums? Are they single dads? Are they, Gen Z? Are they baby boomers? Are they, from an ethnic minority? So we've got a real range of profiles, 6 people. We've got Penelope and we've got Tim. And with anything we're doing that's going to impact our people, we work through this process with the team to say, okay, we're doing this initiative. And I'll say to my team, right, tell me how Penelope is going to experience that and how we might need to adapt our processes to make sure that that's inclusive in as many ways possible, because, we're all white females in my team. We don't have a huge amount of diversity in my team, which is something we want to build on. And I feel incredibly uncomfortable making decisions without believing that I've done my due diligence to try and make that as inclusive as possible. So there are lots of ways you can do it through every aspect of where you're working, but selection and recruitment is absolutely the starting point for making sure you're bringing in that diversity and you're really showing how you create an inclusive culture. You're on mute.
Oh, button's not working. Okay, minor crisis. Never mind. A great question we had in the chat was about the menopause group, Claire. If you were able to, or Anne, if you share a little bit about how that came to be and how people got involved with it, because some of the comments we're getting is like, how do we get employees to buy into this? We see the same people volunteer for focus groups. How can we make it more organic or broader?
It was created by some of our employees. It was this one was one where we just had water cooler moments, people just talking about it, and then someone said, can we start a group, which we were fully supportive of, and that spiraled a load of well, the men's health came second, because some of the guys quite rightly said, well, can we talk about, we need to talk about the impact of being a dad in the workplace and men's health and men's mental health. But the menopause one was started by our employees. They meet every month. I haven't attended it. I'm not going through the menopause yet. And I think it's great that they're doing it. It doesn't need to be driven by the people team, although members of my team are in there. But we're extending that out to the Cipher to have some broad things. But it's really hard to get that attendance. I think a lot of it is about being consistent with these groups and not just dropping them if they feel like they're not gaining momentum. I think figuring out how you're communicating the benefits and the impact and the topics that were discussed. And if people are comfortable advertising that they're part of those groups, so that people can maybe approach them to have a one-to-one conversation and understand a bit more about it in a slightly more confidential or in confidence way, then that's always a good way to get people to feel a little bit more confident to join those groups. And I don't know about the audience, but certainly we have some of those key employees that are always really up for, I'll run that group, and I'm very happy to be at the front of it, and they're brilliant ambassadors. So the more you can work with them to really promote and engage with the workforce in a way that you as a people team or you as a senior leader might not be able to do, then that's just a fab way to get people more involved.
Also, and do you have any extra views there or experiences you can share?
I guess what we're talking about here is employee networks, staff networks, and how they start and how they're sustained and how they become more efficient or effective, or maybe how the role and the place of that network maybe shifts over time. And I think often it is just as with the menopause one, I think it it was happened around, you know, that Menopause Day this year, and there was a we had a Ciphr webinar, but there was also an internal chat set up around that, and it's just built from there. You know, I can't pretend that I'm heavily involved with that group, you know, but I am part of the chat. And but yeah, I think initially you know, you can't set up those groups unless there's some support from your employees to do that. You know, you do have to have those people, those movers and shakers, if you like, who kind of initiate that, however much maybe the organisation thinks that it would be a great idea if we had a network on this or had a network on that. You know, you can't force people to do that. But I think and you know, maybe once the ball starts rolling and people see that this is a model, you know, others will come forward with different, you know, different identities or different issues. I'm really pleased to see that it did broaden out into the men's health group as well. I think that's absolutely critical. Often what you see with these groups is they're quite closed groups to start off with, and people use them to share experiences and maybe have a bit of a moan about the organisation or think, but already, you know, they are becoming, I think, a really, you know, that menopause group and the men's health group potentially haven't been involved with that, but they help to indicate and give a steer to the organisation about how policies need to change or new things that we can do, or what the critical issues are. You know, I know from the menopause chat is, you know, some people sharing some really personal stuff on there about challenges they face when they come to work every day and how tricky that is for people in certain roles, etc., which, you know, will hopefully filter into thinking, well, how can we make managers more aware that these types of things are going, you know, there's a bigger piece here. It's not just let's not just keep this to this group. Obviously the personal stuff is there, but the more general themes, the implications for the workplace, you know, that can be taken into a policy or an awareness level, and really help to support things to be better in the workplace. So I think you know, those employee networks in many organisations start as a small group of people who share some issues, but they turn into employee resource groups, where those groups actually feed in a more formal way to what's going on in the organisation. You know, and Claire was talking about having these profiles of people, you know, that's the groups are a really important source of information, because Claire was saying, you know, all her team are white women. You've got these profiles, which is absolutely great, but you need to be speaking to people who've actually got those identities. So once you've got the networks, you've got people with those identities who have shown an interest that they want to be involved, they want to make things better, change things up. So you've got a source of experience there. So they move from being more kind of more informal to more formalised and more strategically support the organisation in the development of policies. But the other thing I just wanted to say is, like, it would be great. I think it's great to get these networks talking to each other. So I'd love the men's health group to talk more to the menopause group, because there's so much information that can be shared there, you know, as a starting point before, you know, broadening that out to the whole organisation. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I am not going through the menopause yet. I'm still a little bit too young for that, but I have joined the Meno chat group, and I have learned a lot from the women sharing their experiences there, and found that really valuable. And in understanding particularly how, like, menopause can affect performance at work with sleeping patterns, depression, anxiety, that kind of thing. I went into our Ciphr HR system and checked all of our absence types, and one of the absence types on there is sunburn, but menopause wasn't on there. So I said to our head of people ops, can we put that on there? And then just having that as an option makes it feel like it's okay to talk about it, and that you can start having those discussions. And while it's really important that the groups are safe spaces for people that are concerned with, and if we talk about women's health, there's a lot you can learn from other people who've gone through similar things, even if you're not in that life stage yet.
Yeah, I think you know, Anne and I have spoken a lot about our DEI strategy, and my absolute biggest thing is it starts with education. You know, if people don't understand you're never going to be able to see positive change across an organisation. You know, it is absolutely the fundamentals. So I think if there's going to be a focus on anything, focus on that incremental change and that incremental education, because you can have, you know, when we're talking about International Women's Day, we can have some of the best, brightest, most fantastic female leaders and women in the workforce. But if, you know, if the rest of the population and the men that are leading, you know, a lot of the time leading those organisations or also influential, don't understand the challenges that are being faced, then we'll never get anywhere. So it's absolutely fundamental to any journey of change, is that education and starting with that. But yeah, we've learnt loads as a people team. It's been brilliant. And sorry, we are a company that does the hands up, because we find that actually that's a really great way for women to get their voice as well in meetings. So yeah, Ange, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to add on the back of that as well. Obviously, I work in a team I'm the only female, so it's full of males. And when we did the menopause webinar, that was something that we all watched off the back of that. And we actually had a really great discussion afterwards. And there was so much that we learned as a group, that even I, being a female, not being at that stage of my life yet, learned a lot about, you know, the effect that can have and the impact that it has on how you feel about work as well. And like you say, it should be a topic that we talk about, likewise for men's health as well, because if we all kind of understand what's going on in the background and the impact that can have, it kind of makes it a safer space for people to feel like Catherine said, that it is something that's normal, that happens and affects everybody in a different way. We just might not know about it yet.
Yeah, and I kind of hate the fact that the having that menopause chat brought to the surface that so many women were struggling, especially with disrupted sleep and then their ability to concentrate at work, and we're doing that in silence and in isolation from each other. And actually, when they start able to connect, they're like, I get that too. How are you getting on with medication? Tips for speaking to doctors. And that feeds into things like we can flag our benefits policy, which includes virtual GP access and health cash plans, which can help people access the help they need more quickly, which all ultimately adds up to a better culture and better commercial performance if we want to tie this back to organisational objectives. Claire?
Yeah, continuing with that really, and the flip side, you know, menopause is one group of our employees. You know, the other side is we have a huge amount of female employees that deal with different health issues. Endometriosis is massive. We have so many employees, as we know. It's getting more and more awareness, and that typically is hitting the other end of that age spectrum, where we've got employees that are going through that, and it has equally huge impacts on their ability to work. So I think the health aspect around being a female in the workplace is massive, because it's so multidimensional. You know, you bring in having a family. You know, lots of people, I was once, had real awful health issues after having my daughter, and it just you know, it's just one of the many challenges. But it's great that there's so much more awareness, and it's wonderful if you can create communities in your organisation where those women feel supported, whether it be through their colleagues, their people team, their leadership, their benefits, and hopefully it's all of those things. But the health agenda within the women in work piece is a huge one. It's definitely one that should be given the correct level of attention and awareness, and just breaking down some of those taboo aspects, so people feel like they can have those conversations and be more open and honest. Sorry, you're on mute. Anne, you're on mute.
Yeah, just a final point maybe on menopause, but I think, and you know, women's health issues in general, I think it is still a tricky topic for some men to talk about, and we do need to recognise that. As somebody has put on, oh yeah, Catherine, you put our Menno chat is open to men too, but not many takers so far. I think, you know, it would probably be quite a brave man to jump in on the Menno chat group, but I think, you know, there are other ways you can do it, you know, and it's not because that's what we do, but we've got an e-learning module on menopause, which goes into quite a lot of detail, and that actually is quite a nice way, because individuals, men and or women, or, you know, we're talking in the binary here, but of course, you know, we're talking about all genders. You know, anybody can look at that in the comfort of their own home or whatever, in front of their laptop, without other people around. So in terms of encouraging people to get that awareness and understanding and learning, you know, e-learning is quite a nice way, because nobody's looking over your shoulder while you're doing it, and it can help you you know, really significantly, I think, understand some of the challenges. Yeah, and somebody mentioned, you know, the partners of people who are experiencing menopause, and I think that's absolutely right, you know. And I remember when we created the menopause module, also an experience shared by a young woman who just said, you know, her mum, you know, she didn't understand what was going on, and it all made sense now when she, you know, and it was such a difficult time for her family. And she had no clue. But so it is all about learning. It's all about understanding. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Anne. I'm going to just move the discussion on slightly because we've only got 15 minutes left and we could probably spend all day here. But I kind of want to talk a little bit about navigating the career ladder, bringing in experiences here or in other companies. So, Ange, you've mentioned that you're the only woman in your team, and it's a really commercially driven, sales focused environment. How has that impacted your career? How have you felt as the only woman in your team here?
It's been interesting, I have to say. I think I'm lucky and really fortunate that I'm around a really good group of people, and I think that really helps, especially as the organisation is, you know, so open to talking about things that you might be struggling with, and I think that makes the space more comfortable in itself, because, you know, there are maybe certain things that I might experience that they might not, and I think actually just talking about it and making it quite clear helps everybody to understand different points of view. But I think it's actually pushed me along in my career. I think there's a lot of things that I've learnt along the way, and lots of experiences that I've kind of, you know, been involved in past sales jobs as well. I've been in very heavy female environments, so it's a contrast, but there's things I've learnt from both aspects. So yeah, it's been very interesting. But as I say, I think the culture of the organisation doesn't make me feel like I'm the minority, if that makes sense. I think it really helps me to kind of just feel like that's my team, that's what I'm part of. So yeah, I think lots of lessons learned, but I think there are, as you say, there are always challenges that we kind of need to overcome, and I think talking about them definitely helps us to kind of move in the right direction with those as well.
Do you ever find there's a risk that you fall into typical patterns of behaviour or roles within your team by being the only woman in there?
Yeah, I think I'm sometimes seen as the responsible one. I'll go in with a pad of paper. I know that we've kind of spoken about it before, but it's, you know, it's, don't worry, and we'll do it. We don't even need to take our pens out, you know. So I think sometimes it's assumed that that's kind of my role. And I think sometimes I actually think I do it without noticing it, just because I want to kind of be seen sometimes. And I think we kind of accept that as well. And, you know, sometimes be doing a session, for example, and people be talking over you, or you'll ask a question and everyone looks at everyone else before they kind of come to you for your kind of answer. So I think that's kind of the, I suppose, little challenges that I've kind of faced, but I suppose you push them under the carpet a little bit and try to kind of forget about them. And but yeah, I think the responsible category is definitely somewhere where I think sometimes you get placed, and it's kind of falls on your shoulders to kind of do that, and then you just end up doing it. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else had like similar kind of experience of it. Claire, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of now do the whole, I'm absolutely not being the person in
Yeah.
you know, senior meetings in particular. I won't be the person that will take notes. I won't be the person that cleans up the cups, and, you know, yeah. I've made a point of that, because, you know, as the only female board member, it can be, and it's been, you know, it's a career, it's a generational thing. It's, you know, it's been the whole career. But you do tend to just kind of go, oh, I'll do it. But I think that's where it's so important that the leaders are setting the tone for those sorts of things. You know, we talk about raising our hands, but it's something that, you know, a lot of our leaders are very good at making sure that people do a raise hand in Teams calls. Otherwise, people just get spoken over, whether they're male or female, but it will be, you know, the same loud voices that are able to speak, and other people kind of get pushed back. One of the things I know Ange and I have specifically talked about with kind of navigating the career ladder is also the age element. I'm not quite a spring chicken as I was, but, you know, when I first started out and I was head of people at, you know, 23, 24, and you're already really lacking confidence and have that imposter syndrome. But layered on top of that, you feel like people are just looking at you thinking, what on earth do they know? You know, they're 23, and actually I feel like it's another challenge that women face if you've got additional layers of diversity that you feel disadvantage you, whether they do or don't. It's how you feel in those scenarios, and it's all about that inclusive thing. But you know, age is a real weird one. I think it's actually typically a negative if you're younger, whereas you would envisage it to be, wow, they're really successful and they're young, but actually you're kind of in the position going, it doesn't feel that way. So I think there are specific challenges, and I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with that. I think, as I say, like being fairly young in my career, I think sometimes I do feel like you do have that imposter syndrome, and you kind of feel like you do sometimes shout to be that voice that's heard, and you know, you need to kind of do a few extra things to kind of sit in the same place. And you know, even things like just like we say about being the organised one and kind of taking on those additional little tasks, just because you think, I don't know, sometimes you think maybe that's kind of what I need to do to fit in. And I think I think that's definitely something I resonate with. And but as I say, I think as a company culture, it's been really refreshing actually to come into a place that obviously we've got yourself, Claire, that's in a male heavy environment as well, and lots of experience kind of shared there. And it's always nice to kind of see that there's that support there. And I think when you do have that in the background, it really does boost your confidence as well, which is something I've found has been incredibly helpful when I maybe do sometimes question if I should raise my hand in a meeting, you know, and I maybe haven't had a say yet. I think that really is, I do try to kind of push myself a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and I know that makes an impact over time as well, which kind of helps me. So yeah.
It does. It's all confidence, you know. I think a huge amount of it comes down to confidence, and the more you do it, and the more you know, raise your voice or figure out the best way to communicate within your team or within your organisation, and that might have to be a slightly different way, which is wrong, but it's also about getting to a point where you've built up the confidence that you then are able to stand your own in those meetings in the same way that your male colleagues might naturally have the confidence to do so. So I think it is navigating your own journey. You know, massive things that helped me were, I had brilliant, all male actually, CEOs that were very encouraging, but I had some brilliant, really strong female mentors. And I would really recommend, if you feel that that's something you're struggling to navigate, or you want some support with different stages of your careers. You know, I had one at the outset really early on in my career, and then I've had one over the last couple of years as I've been evolving in that board position. They've been so instrumental in helping me navigate some of that stuff, and I would absolutely champion it. You know, reach out to your network, or you know, lots of the HR profession in particular, I've always found very happy to share their knowledge without it being a paid for mentorship, or you know, something that you have to kind of go and get a business case for. So do explore that, because that's been a real help for me along the way.
Yeah, and I just noticed Joe in the chat, thank you, has just put a comment in. As senior managers and directors, we also have a role to play to make sure quieter women may have their say. You know, and I think that, you know, women can often feel, I've got to force myself to, you know, speak up and be confident or whatever. So this is very much a part of, you know, it shouldn't be that individual's responsibility, really. It should be a colleague, maybe someone more senior, maybe not, but you know, we all have to play our part in that circumstance. You know, the term would be being an ally, and actually pointing out or enabling or supporting, allowing somebody, helping somebody to speak in their own voice, you know, and giving people space. And that comes from, you know, being an inclusive manager or chairing a meeting in a very inclusive way. So, you know, and it goes back to that apology thing, isn't it? Always sort of apologizing for, oh, I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry, but I've got something to say. You know, no, why would you be sorry? But that's, you know, the responsibility shouldn't fall on that individual. It should be something that is the norm, that, you know, we have this inclusive way of working that allows people to, and supports people, and people speak, you know, not speak for others, but speak to allow others to speak, enable others to speak, is really, really important. Yeah.
And I think hybrid working has made some of these challenges more visible or harder to tackle, because even in we now work in a hybrid company, but majority of people are remote a lot of the time. But there's still always that element of, are you visible in the office? If you're working remotely, how do you become visible to other senior leaders and demonstrate your expertise and credibility? How do you act in meetings? Are you using things like the hand raising or the reactions? Do you have to follow up with notes if you don't feel comfortable speaking up? How does all that work? And part of our new office move has been creating some ways of working guidance. So we now have guidance around how we would like meetings to be run, and that includes things like, you shouldn't be talking over people, you should be using the hand raising, you should be having an agenda, and you can capture notes with a transcript and that kind of thing. So that goes some of the way to mitigating some of those challenges, and the guidance have been created with diversity in mind, so neurodiversity, with people maybe not feeling comfortable speaking up in meetings, or people who are more junior, for example. So that's something that can be considered. I'm really conscious that we're going to run out of time. We could probably stay here all day. I did thank you for everyone who's bringing in comments in the chat. It's great to see you talking amongst yourselves and giving the thumbs up and stuff and sharing your experiences. I won't read all of those out, so if you do want to have a look, dive in there. We did have one sort of formal question come in from Kat around infertility challenges and the fear of senior managers knowing someone is trying to conceive and that prejudicing their potential for promotion. Did we have any advice for operating within an organisation that doesn't have the family forming benefits that we talked about? I know Claire or Anne, perhaps if you could pick up on that one. It's really hard.
That's a really hard one. That is a really hard one, because all you're doing is breaking down bias there. You know, other than leaning back on what's legally allowed and what's not legally allowed, you're relying on the discretion of those managers a lot of the time to not make a biased decision. I think, again, making sure you're creating a space where people feel that they're able to voice their concerns, that they have, whether it's within the people team or within other coaching and mentorship programs you have around the organisation, so they can reach out to someone they trust to have those conversations. You know, it's really good practice, regardless, that everyone is just protecting themselves. You know, that they're documenting the work they're doing, they're making sure that they're being visible with how they're performing, that if they feel they're working in an environment where it's not a particularly fair regime, I mean, question whether you do or don't want to work there at all, but you know, there are things you can do to just make sure that you're evidencing the progress you're making, so that you have something to point to say, well, actually, you know, this is my this is why I think I should be right for the role, regardless. But that is a really tricky one to navigate. I'm not sure I've got any solid advice on that one, unfortunately.
And is there anything you could add there?
Yeah, no, that is tricky. I mean, I think it's very, just sort of echo what Claire said there, really. I think it's about, you know, so if you're sharing information, that type of information with your manager, you know, maybe also think about who else in the organisation who you trust you can share it with as well, so it's not just between you and that person. You know, just make sure you note down any conversations, anything that's been agreed, or any, you know, the way in which any responses have made you feel, what impacts that has had on you, if it's been a sort of negative impact, you know, and just hopefully there will be, you know, and again, it's about a bigger structure, isn't it, within organisations, and bigger processes that are put out there for, or signposting to places that people can go in the organisation where they can talk about things and get some advice and guidance. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know that I've got anything else further to say, really, but you know, you would hope your organisation would have flagged, you know, if you've got an issue, talk to these people. You know, don't just keep it between yourself and your manager, and don't be afraid to raise it with others. Yeah, I'm afraid that's all I can think of, really.
Okay.
I was actually going to pick up on another question that someone raised about a more feminine way of communicating, but I might have to reach out to them directly, because I'm really conscious that this webinar is about to end.
I can give you 1 minute, Claire. I can give you 1 minute.
I was only going to say just that the question was about, you know, that we should maybe have a more feminine way of talking in work, and I really agree with that. I think there's a huge piece around your employer brand and how you're engaging with your business around what's the tone of voice. We've just been through something very similar at our work. at Ciphr even. But I actually funnily had a male employee, and we were talking about women in leadership the other day, and he said that he actually will probably be more empathetic with his female employees than he would his male employees. And I was saying, don't, you know, probably be more empathetic to your male employees so they feel that they can maybe be a bit more vulnerable, and maybe, you know, have conversations that you're not enabling through that tone of voice, and probably bring your conversations with your female employees more into that central point, because what you're doing instantly is you're treating those individuals differently, and probably not having a positive impact on either group. So I just want to say I really agree with your point around that tone of voice and trying to create communication that is inclusive of everyone, essentially, coming back all the way 360 back to the inclusive point right at the beginning. But yeah, very happy to explore those conversations with anyone on an individual basis.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. I think we really have like run out of time, but I feel like we covered a lot of ground, which is great. So if you want to pick up conversations with any of us, we're all on LinkedIn. You can find us, talk to us there. We're happy to chat. Just as a reminder, if you'd like a free trial of the Gender Equality at Work microlearning module, someone is going to be in touch after this call to offer that to you, and you just need to reply to that email, and you can have a go at that if you want to. All of this has been recorded, and we will share the recording with you afterwards. I am going to send a feedback poll, hopefully through Teams just now. It would be really helpful if you could offer a bit of feedback in there about how you found today's broadcast. This is our first time doing something that's really discussion based and kind of with a lot more personal experiences. This is new territory for us, so we really appreciate your feedback. You can also use that poll to indicate if you'd like to find out anything more about any of the products and services that we offer. So thank you in advance for filling that in. I'm very appreciative of it. Thank you to Ange, Claire and Anne for joining us and being so open and honest about the work we're doing here at Ciphr and the personal challenges you've navigated, and sharing your expertise as well. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining us and participating in the chat. It was really great. Thank you so much. We hope it's been helpful and that you will join us for another Ciphr webinar again soon. Thanks so much and take care. Bye. Thank you.